Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Prime Live. You are still watching the best show between 6 and 8. And up next, we have Ronald Abvajee, who is our renowned wellness expert with an extensive experience in promoting healthy living and well-being. Now, today we will be discussing ADHD Awareness Month. And Ronald is going to be sharing with us, his insights on, how wellness practices can support those that are affected with ADHD. Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah so much for joining us and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam, and it's great to be with you.
Thank you so much. Now, before we even start talking about ADHD, right, I'm not going to ask you to define it, but what I will do is ask you to tell us what is actually happening in the brains of someone that who's living with ADHD, because I know when the normal definition is like too complex for people that do not even know the medical, language. So maybe if you can tell us what's actually happening to someone that is living with ADHD.
So think about it this way. It's like having the brains of a Ferrari, a sports engine car, but the brakes of a bicycle.
What?
So that's what happens. So imagine a sports car
Yeah.
having the brake system of a bicycle.
Yeah.
Difficult to slow down, difficult to take corners, difficult to control, and that's what ADHD is. And ADHD is an acronym we use, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Many people still refer to it as ADD, but that's the old language utilized, which is attention deficit disorder. Hyperactivity is associated with it. So what happens in our brain is that it's a neurodevelopmental disorder that is associated with a decreased ability to focus, a decreased ability for emotional regulation, and increased ability of impulsivity. What does that mean is that it impacts your ability as a child to focus and to function optimally in academic situations and school, and labeled as the naughty children. Kanti, I'm not a naughty child, I'm just dealing with neurotransmitters or chemicals in the brain that are not optimal. And as an adult, it's associated with not being able to focus or do your job properly, and you're not performing, but also is associated with a higher rate of relationship problems because of that dysregulation of those neurotransmitters. So again, not everybody knows how to drive a Ferrari. Not everybody wants to drive a Ferrari. And if you have the brakes of a bicycle, it means that you are scatty at the best of times, distant most of the time, but impulsive a lot of the time. And that is what happens with ADHD. Now, in the brain itself, there's an impact on 3 neurotransmitters. Dopamine, our reward center, motivation center in the brain, norepinephrine, which is associated as well with helping us focus and so forth, and serotonin. So when those are low, you find that it impacts the behavior. So ADHD in the brain is a biochemical base associated with the physiological action and the behavioral association.
That's a very interesting way to put it. And I want us to also talk about diagnosis. Is this something that you're born with? Can I just get ADHD now as an adult, or is it something that I have to be born with? And also, like, at what point do I now realize that I have ADHD? Because I think we self-diagnose a lot of times. Like, I know my friends just like throw the word around, my ADHD levels are very high, and I'm just like, where did you even get this information from? But I don't think they're the only ones. So please help us with that.
Absolutely. So when you measure blood pressure, you put a cuff on the arm, a blood pressure monitor, and you can actually get a physiological indicator. Now, with many mental health or neurotransmitter or neurodevelopmental conditions, even like depression, etc., it's based on a qualified questionnaire that is done by a person that's qualified, psychiatrist or psychologist. You can't self-diagnose ADHD because then it becomes a crutch and an excuse rather than something you should actually be aware of and deal with. So I live with ADHD and it has been diagnosed, and mine was adult identified. So you sit with a psychiatrist or psychologist and you go through a whole bunch of questions that you need to reflect on, and based on the evaluation of those questions, you get categorized as living with ADHD or not. And then of course you go a medication route and or a behavioral scientist route and or additional support from a lifestyle perspective. Now, to self-diagnose ADHD is amplifying excuses. Ooh, I can't do this because of my ADHD. Ooh, be careful, I've got my ADHD. Ooh, you don't understand it, and not everything on social media, TikTok vibes, is the truth. So when you are diagnosed with it, it has a massive impact because it is prolonged and consistent impacts, not just laziness and a crutch. So when you look at how it's diagnosed, that is how it is diagnosed.
Yeah.
And in adults, it often is associated with a comorbid mental health condition like anxiety, depression, or bipolar. Whereas in children, the comorbidity is not really identified yet. But in South Africa, there's between 3.5 and 4.8% of our population that lives with ADHD, both diagnosed and undiagnosed.
Yeah, that's a very interesting, what you call the stat that you just pulled there. But I want us to also speak about the strategies that are available to manage ADHD.
Well, definitely with ADHD, once you are diagnosed by a psychologist and or psychiatrist, the psychiatrist will then prescribe medication. And the medication is to look at assisting you in identifying which levels of those neurotransmitters you need to adjust, and then observing
Yeah.
the impact on your behavior, the impact on what others observe and then what you observe, the experience of others with you versus your experiences. And that is what they then do, and that is constantly fluctuating, and they're adjusting those doses. There's a lot of medication. The old school one was known as Ritalin, I think, from when I was a child. There was medication that was prescribed, but there's a lot more of enhanced medication associated with supporting it as a primary intervention. A secondary intervention is to do with cognitive behavioral therapy with a psychologist. And there they will focus on the habits, because you cannot fix ADHD only by popping a pill. It's associated with direct behavior and habit changes. You need to build in structure and habits, because your environment becomes a trigger, and when you control and enhance the environment to best help you maximize ADHD as a superpower, which actually it is, once you understand it for yourself, you will then be able to manage it proactively and, of course, excel in facets of your life that were previously impacted. And lastly, you need to accept accountability for the lifestyle changes. Exercise, healthy eating, sleep, cutting out caffeine, sweet things, and not being, so addicted to like sweets, for example, and junk food. Those become crutches that don't create the environmental physiology, or the physiology rather, to maximize your ability to manage and live with ADHD.
I mean, speaking of lifestyle changes, I know that we do have a very interesting clip by Charlotte, who is a clinical dietitian, on foods that actually trigger ADD or ADHD. So let's take a look.
Charlotte, are there any other foods that can trigger ADD or ADHD?
So let me then go back to the Feingold theory, because I know this is another question and we just need to sort of maybe connect the two questions together. In my experience with my one son, definitely certain colorants were a trigger. And in children that I've dealt with it over the years through friends' children or in the practice, tartrazine was one of the major contributors, which is the bright yellow colorant that's very frequently put into energy drinks and so on. And the other one, the bubblegum flavor with the blue colorant, which is, sends thrills down my spine. But definitely that seems to create more symptoms, more symptomatic behavior than the foods or the drinks that are not colored. Feingold was an allergist actually who created this theory, or had this theory, that a diet that was devoid of these artificial colorants and certain preservatives and flavor enhancers would then help children with allergies. And he then used this again when it became hyperactivity and attention deficit disorder came to the fore. So that's where that theory first initiated, and then they showed that it did help in some patients, in some kids. In my own experience, I had a child who not only was hyperactive and had a severe attention deficit, he also got migraines. And we isolated certain foods as a result of that. There was no question that there was this association. So I think with some children, following that Feingold theory definitely will help manage their symptoms, even if they are on medication.
was a very interesting insert to watch, and thank you to Charlotte, who's a dietitian, was just helping us understand the kind of foods that we may be eating that can contribute to ADD and ADHD. Now, up next, I think what we want to know, Ronald, is understanding, because it's very good to it's one thing to diagnose, or rather to define a thing, to say this is ADHD, this is how we live with it, but it's also very important to come up with solutions, especially for people that are living with ADHD, because if you mention that it's like having a brains of a Ferrari and brakes of a bicycle, it means that a lot of the environments that we're living in are not practical for people that are living with ADHD. So let's start with the workspace or workplaces. What can they do to promote, a more efficient, or more, rather, I don't know, a more accepting situation that is easy for them to live with? Because then I don't think they would cope as someone that, for example, I don't have ADHD. We can't be working in the same environment. Like, so how do we work with that?
So workplaces are built for conformity because it's easier to manage larger workforces.
Okay.
You conform into this frame that is the workplace. Our meetings are an hour long. You come in at 8, you leave at 5, you take lunch, those kinds of nuances that happen. And with a hybrid workplace, it's enhanced that even more because there's never an off button, because you're from one meeting to the next on Teams or Zoom or any online media. But what if workplaces created the opportunity to accommodate for diversity in the minds of individuals? But that's associated with those individuals coming forward.
Yeah.
So is your workplace psychologically safe, yes or no? And are people willing to share that, yes, I do deal and have ADHD that is diagnosed? Right?
Yeah.
The next thing we have to look at is that adult ADHD is associated with substance abuse, drugs, alcohol, and other, but also associated with impulsivity. So we know that there's a lot of, and also gambling becomes an addiction. Also, we know that then that's associated with relationship issues. And when you look at the top 3 or 4 things on employee wellness surveys, relationship issues and alcohol and substance abuse and gambling and financial issues are always in the top 5. Always in the top 5. So if that is the lagging impact, that's impacting that employee's ability to thrive. So what if workplaces now said, right, we're going to work on psychological safety and create a safe space for people to share. Secondly, if they are not willing to share, how about you accommodate for a diverse mind in the working environment? Why don't you cut meetings to be efficient to half an hour? Every meeting that you attend has got to have an agenda. That agenda has got to be covering what is the problem, what is the solution, and what are we going to action?
Yeah.
And then give a break, because that way you're bringing in micro focus and micro attention, which is conducive to those living with ADHD.
Most definitely, and I like that you mentioned that. Now, let's talk about, or as we wrap up this conversation, right, because it's ADHD Awareness Month, what encouragements or also advice would you give to those who are living with ADHD, but not only them, family, friends who are living with someone that's living with ADHD? It could be a mom, it could be a caregiver, friends, cousins, whatever it is. How is it, or how can they best show support to people that are living with ADHD?
I think number 1 is the judgment lens.
Okay.
So instead of why can't you focus? Why are you so impulsive? Change that language to, hey, what can I do in this environment at home or at work to help you thrive? Maybe it is to change something in that environment at home and or at work.
Okay.
The second thing is those living with ADHD is to take those that are in the environment of home and family and friends and relationships to understand the condition with the professional, because they will need to also understand certain elements that you may be dealing with or going through, but you need to accept accountability as that person with ADHD. It's not an excuse for your behavior. And that is something we need to remove. So what you then look at is what you eat, how we exercise, how we converse, what we do, and the space, again, it's got to be psychologically safe. If you can't talk to those at home, how do you expect to talk to those at work? And vice versa. So are we coming in from a judgment lens, or are we coming in from a supportive lens? And please be aware, for couples that where one partner has ADHD, it takes a lot of work. And my suggestion would be to go for couples counseling, just to get to a baseline where we both understand what we're dealing with, so we can both be informed, because you can't manage what you don't know.
Most definitely. And I like that you mentioned it in a way that shows the seriousness of actually people that are living with ADHD. Because I don't want to lie, because of so many self-diagnosed people out here, they make it seem like it's one of those things. So that we end up not even taking it as a serious thing, because like everybody has ADHD these days. So you don't understand that it's actually a serious, situation. It needs a lot of care. Like you mentioned, in relationships, if you are with someone that's living with ADHD, you need couples therapy and whatever it is. I think it highlights the importance and the seriousness of the matter. But you know what, Ronald, Jazakallah so much for joining us, and thank you so much for just highlighting the important aspects of people that are living with ADHD.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Viewers at home, that was Ronald Abvajee, who is our in-house wellness expert, and we were just talking about, ADHD, and in commemoration, or rather celebrating, ADHD Day, or World ADHD Day. That is a tongue twister. But viewers at home, let's go to a quick break. We'll see you right after this.